My name's Dave Blake. I'm the founder and CEO of ClientSuccess. We're excited to have Kristi here. Kristi's actually in town in Utah, just down the street in a hotel. Different background, Kristi, than everybody's normally sees from you, right?
I know, this is so weird. I'm wearing headphones, I'm in a hotel room, but travel, regardless of travel, right? The show must go on.
That's
right.
And
so super excited about today's topic. I don't know if I'm more excited about today's webinar topic or tomorrow's CSM Summit, but 2 great days with a lot of fantastic content. So pretty pumped.
And it's 2 great days with the community. So that's great. We always like to be with everybody. So thanks for everyone who's joined us today. Kristi, great topic today. What are we talking about?
All right. Today is all about understanding CSM to customer ratios. I get asked this question all the time, Dave. I'm sure you've had a ton of these conversations over the years. Everyone is always trying to figure out, like, what is the magic number, right? How do I figure out how many customers each of my CSMs can support? And so today I'm gonna break that down, talk to the community about how you can think about this, how to approach it, the data you need to leverage, and hopefully we'll put everyone on the path to figuring out their own ratios.
Awesome. I love this topic. This is actually one of the first blogs I ever wrote, posts back in the day about this topic. So I'm anxious to get your take on it, and I'll be back. I'll jump off now and be back to man the Q&A at the end.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. So guys, as Dave mentioned earlier, same routine every week, right? If you have questions, please go to the Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom bar, or maybe it's the top of your screen. Either way, it says Q&A. Drop your questions in there. At the end, Dave is going to pull that up and we'll go through as many as we can. We try to get through all of them. If not, happy to answer anything you've got via LinkedIn as well. So feel free to reach out. I'm navigating this off of a little laptop in a hotel room with headphones. So excuse me if it's not the same level of energy and enthusiasm as always. I'm going to try to keep it high. I'm just navigating a whole new setup today. So really excited to jump into this topic. Like I said, this entire series in April, I'm tackling topics that are a bit more provocative, right? Things that I think people have strong opinions about. And my opinion is, again, my opinion, right? This doesn't mean that what we're going to cover today is going to be right for you, but I think it's something that's really important for us to all address, because what you'll hear me start with is that there is not a one-size-fits-all model. All right, so I want to kick off with this. Maybe especially for those of you who have been in customer success for a while, I know that if we were in a room together, what I would see is everyone's hands shoot up when I say this, but who's heard this before, right? Every CSM should be carrying $2 million in ARR, right? That has been this like number that's been thrown out here for far too long and perpetuated by folks who just believe this to be true. To be honest with you, this number came from a former CEO made VC who had a very strong content platform and he threw this number out there and it stuck, right? Sometimes these things stick. And so I'm here to tell you that we should not be thinking about this, right? If you hear your CEO, your chief customer officer, somebody else in your business, maybe a CRO or a VP of sales or whomever, say that each CSM should just be carrying $2 million in ARR and that's how we should be approaching this, please tell them that they're wrong. What I will do today is I'm going to give you a whole bunch of little things to help support why that doesn't make any kind of sense. That way you can have a very well-structured and educated conversation around this. But please, this doesn't work, right? Where does this number coming from? Doesn't make sense. Everyone's business is so different. So what I also will say here is that there is no one-size-fits-all customer success ratio model. What I'm going to give you today are the breakdowns of how you're going to approach this in your business. But it doesn't matter if you've built out your leverage ratios at multiple companies, right? It's never the same. Nobody should be looking for a standard. It doesn't work that way. So what I'm going to do is guide you guys through how you can come up and think about this, but it is so specific to your product, right? It's specific to your industry. It's so specific to so many different things that we're going to break all that down. But I have to put this out there because I get asked this all the time. Hey, Kristi, what is that ratio? I don't even like to tell people what my team's ratio is because I don't want them to think that because it's mine that it should be theirs. So we're gonna get off that. We're gonna start with this, right? There's no one size fits all ratio model, but we will unpack what we should be thinking about. So the first thing that I want to talk to you guys about is, I believe, and I definitely skipped ahead. Sorry. It's got to start with your customer lifecycle. Now, I know sometimes we talk about this as like the customer journey. The reality of it is your customers are going on their own journey that's agnostic of you. What we're talking about here is their life cycle through the partnership, right? So you've got to start there. Now, I emphasize this because this should be the foundation of how you're thinking about supporting and engaging with your customers. This is a sample of our customer lifecycle at ClientSuccess. Again, yours could look very different. Visually, it could have different stages. It could have 10 stages, it doesn't matter. This is ours. So what you're going to see today as I break this down is I'm trying to use some examples, not all, but some from what I've designed here at ClientSuccess, just to help you guys understand how I've approached this and give you that contextual information to kind of anchor onto. So what we started with is our customer lifecycle, which, as you guys may have seen from other bootcamp series, we start with a 4-stage approach, which begins with our align stage, which is all about just having that common alignment with our customers, right? Setting expectations, setting goals, determining what this will look like for both parties. The next stage is our execute stage, which is primarily our onboarding and training and enablement to really help our customers get set up with the partnership. And then we go into this realize stage. That's probably the longest one for us. This is where your customers are working on really adopting and integrating the technology into their workflows, really maximizing the use cases and the value from each of the different aspects of the platform, and really going deep. Hopefully at this point, you're starting to see some successes and maybe achieving some of their goals. And then our final stage is all about advocacy. And advocacy to me, and I've been very vocal about this, you can demonstrate this in a multitude of ways. Your customers could be advocates if they're continuing the partnership, right? If they're growing the partnership, so retention, growth. It could be that they're actually serving as advocates. In some cases, maybe they're going to be references for you. They're participating in case studies. They're speaking at your events. They're doing a co-branded article with you. They're doing podcasts or webinars. All of those different activities can demonstrate their advocacy. And that's our end goal, right? We want to be mutually successful, right? We want to make sure that our customers are successful with the partnership. And as a result, we are as well. And we're both going to see that, right? Our customers are going to see it through the value that they're driving. And we're going to see it through that continued partnership, that long-term trajectory. So this is our customer lifecycle. Now, why I start here is because this is going to help set the stage for how we want to design our engagement model, right? And how we want to partner with our customers along this journey, which will help really set the foundation of how our customer success management team is going to have to usher our customers through this journey. And that's going to be key, right? Because we have to understand that the work that they're going to be responsible for in support of our customers embarking on this. So really important to just figure out what your life cycle looks like and start with that first. So if you guys have not already defined this and put some pen and paper down and really map this out, you have to start there. Starting with trying to figure out your leverage ratios or starting with your segmentation first, it doesn't work. It has to begin here because everything else will augment off of this. So if you haven't, go start building your customer lifecycle, right? And this should be through the lens and eyes of your customers. And think about that for a second. Your lifecycle shouldn't be the journey that you want your customers to go through. It should be the journey that they need to go through in order to be successful with your solution, right? So please also, as you're building this, design it through the eyes of your customers. All right, now, hopefully at this point, you've got your life cycle down and you have a good understanding of what this is gonna look like and how your team is gonna have to lean in to support your customers. Now, the next thing I always like to do is think about our customer segmentation. Now, most companies probably have segmented their customers and are probably doing it maybe one of few ways. But these are a couple of different ways that I think are really helpful to break down the different segments that you might have in support of your customer base. The first one is size. Now, size could be how big the organization is, right? So if you are somebody who sells licenses, right? So I'm thinking like a CRM like Salesforce, you're thinking about the total employees and getting access to selling each of those individuals' licenses or another solution similar to that. Could be employee size, right? So if it's based on number of employees, I used to work in an organization where we sold based on the number of email addresses that company had. And so for us, the number of employees in that organization really mattered because that would help determine the size and scope of the partnership. So it could be employee size, could be revenue size, right? How much revenue the customer has. This doesn't necessarily mean the revenue they're spending with you. This is how big they are. that can also play a big part in this, right? Like if they are a large organization, how they think about approaching the partnership that might impact it. So that could be something that you're considering. And then their customer base, right? Who their customers are, how they engage with their customers, how they serve. That could also be something that you take into consideration. So again, giving you a big, it depends, but determining the size, that could be a way that you're breaking down your customer segmentation. The second one is the spend. This is pretty common. I see a lot of folks approach it this way because it seems to be probably easiest or the most common, or just, I guess, what everyone's done. So status quo, but what the customer's current or future investment in the partnership is. Now, I like the latter. So if you're doing it solely based on their current investment, maybe that's not the best way. Maybe it's better to think about what is the future growth there. Sometimes it's not always easy to scope that or predict it, but if you can, that could be another way to think about that. I'll give you an example on this. Google has been a customer of mine at other companies, and Google, obviously, very big organization. Maybe some of you have heard of it. And so we had a very small investment because we started with one small part of their business, and we knew that the investment could be huge. So how we segmented them wasn't necessarily based on their current spend, but on what we believed the future spend to be. And we actually categorized them into a different segment based off of that scope. So we were nurturing that account because we knew ultimately we wanted to grow it. So again, spend doesn't need to be their current ARR, could be what you believe and have some visibility around their future ARR. The next could be industry. We see this all the time, right? Maybe it's what industry they're in. It could be their vertical, businesses that they serve. So for example, I worked in a company where we split a lot of our customers based on retail, publishing, e-commerce, because how we supported those different industries really changed the use case and the value that they got from the platform. Sometimes that helps because you can also create subject matter experts in your customer success organization based on industry expertise, because the use case, they're so specific. So just another way to think about it could be the industry that they're in. The fourth one here, use case, maybe how they're using your product, what products they've purchased. So if you're a customer like, if you're a company like Oracle, right, you might have a ton of different products. You could have ERP, you could have a CRM, like you could have all these other different products. You might want to think about how you're breaking it down based off the products that they purchase, because maybe that's going to impact the entire customer lifecycle that we talked about earlier. Maybe it's specific to the products and the modules they're consuming. Could also be on the objectives that they have, right? And their intended core use cases. So again, you can break this down and try to figure out what is the best way to support your customers based on how they're intending to use your product. And the last one is the maturity. This is really interesting, and I'm going to actually be talking a little bit about this in the future, probably in a boot camp later this year, but the maturation, their journey there. And so this is going to look at things like, if you think about looking at a maturation model, you're going to see things like resources that they have and investments that they're making, focus, business support. So there's going to be a lot of elements here that might impact, right, a customer who is just getting started in the maturity of this industry that you're supporting, versus a customer who's very mature. They've got, tons of resources, very strategic. How they use your product is going to look very different. So it could be based on their placement in the maturity model or their own customer journey. So again, you've got to figure this out. And not only your segmentation, and I'm walking you through 5 different ways you can think about it, but because how you segment your customers might impact the journey experience that they're going to have, which is going to impact the resources that you're going to staff against this. So it's important to understand what your segmentation is, because again, if you have a high engagement model versus a mid or kind of a lighter touch engagement model to a low touch or no touch model, that's going to be very different, right, in terms of how you're going to staff your teams and resources against that. So it's really important to figure this out before you get started into those ratios. All right, so we started with 2 things before we even got into anything around leverage ratios, right? We've got to figure out your life cycle, and you've got to nail your segmentation. So you've got to figure this out before you can start to figure out how you want to allocate and how many customers against each of your CSMs. So another thing that I start to do is, now that we've got visibility into our customer lifecycle, right? You've probably got a bunch of different tasks or activities, or again, we talked about that engagement model, that are going to play a part in how and what you're expecting your CSMs to be doing with your customers. Now, the what is important, but you've also got to start to figure out how much time each of those what's take, because You can't treat them all the same, right? They're probably not all the same. I can tell you right now, we're going to look at this. Like I've got high, medium, and low, which means the level of effort and time that it's going to take to execute some of these things for my team. And so, and again, these are our experience kind of touch points across our customer lifecycle here at ClientSuccess. So you got to figure out your own. This is not going to be what yours looks like. This is just kind of an assessment of what ours look like here. But let's talk through this. I had to figure out, how much time am I expecting my team to spend on each of their customers if we know that each of their customers throughout their life cycle are going to have to go through some of these things. Now, of course, listen, what we're going to do is we're going to account for majority of the things, but this is not everything, right? We know that tons of things come up, things derail, new priorities, new customers, new scope, new product, customers that are growing, their needs are shifting. You're never going to be able to design this in a way that is going to solve for everything, right? Do not strive for perfection. You will never get there. Instead, try to figure out what are some of those core experiences. So I'll talk you through some of ours. First one, onboarding. At ClientSuccess, our customer success team, we manage onboarding for our customers. So we've got to account for the time that we have to allocate through onboarding. This is really important for us to account for because onboarding takes a lot longer than some of the other things that we're going to do, right? So from a time intensity standpoint, we're going to spend a lot of time with our customers when they're in those early stages. In some cases, we could be meeting with them a few times a week just to help accelerate their configuration and their adoption, right? So we want them to have quick access to the platform, quick access to value. So we might be making some really heavy investments up front from a time standpoint. The next thing that's pretty meaty for us is once we do get out of onboarding, our team, we have a regular recurring cadence of engagement with our customers. Now, we recommend and lean in and kind of would like to do, every 2 to 3 weeks with our customers. But I also am aware that not all of our customers want to meet with us that often. So we do allow them to lean in and tell us what they feel an appropriate engagement model is. And so maybe for some of them, it's once a month. They feel like that's totally fine because maybe they've used the platform before. Maybe they just are super comfortable. Maybe they're in their 3rd year. And so they're just really intimately familiar and they don't need a lot of hand-holding. Whatever the case may be, recurring cadence of engagement is something that's going to be a big time commitment from us because we want to make sure that we are consistently engaging with those customers. The next thing for us is thinking through training and enablement. Now, if you look at my color coding grid, I've got blue are my higher time intensity items. Green is that medium. And so I've got low here as my kind of lower time commitment things. And you'll see some numbers there in the parentheses, that grid in the right corner, where it says high, medium, low, and then it says 2 to 3, 1 to 2, 0 to 1. Those are hours on average. So please understand that we're doing everything based off of averages, because again, you're never going to nail this. It's not a perfect science. So training enablement for us is a medium thing. We might have customers who are saying, you know what, we've got a whole new team, or we're starting a new year, or we've reconfigured how we're using ClientSuccess. So we want to retrain our team. We want to work with them and enable them on how to get the most from it in their day-to-day. We want to do end user training. We want to do admin training. We want to do leadership training, right? During those sessions, this is going to be, obviously more engagement for us, but it's something that happens in a very finite period of time. This is not something that continues and happens every week or even every month. It might happen once a quarter or once every 6 months, or maybe even once a year, right? So I didn't put that in a high because it's not the frequency in which it happens based off of how much work is involved. Didn't necessarily need me to qualify that as a high. The next one is our core meeting. Again, some of you who have attended boot camps in the past, you know that for me, I don't do EBRs or QBRs. I've got my reasons. You can go listen to my boot camp. We do a core meeting, which is our customer objectives review meeting. And so we mark this as a low. Now, I put it as a low, not because this isn't important, it doesn't take time. We've built a deck template that works really well for us. So the time intensity and the time commitment from the CSMs is not very high. The deck itself should probably only take maybe 30, 45 minutes to build. If we've got a lot of stuff, maybe it could take a little bit less. Scheduling the meeting, right? And then executing it. Now we're looking at this over the course of weeks, right? So it's not, we might take an hour 1 week, or 45 minutes 1 week, and then an hour another week. So we're trying to do this based off of week commitment also, not total time to complete one of these things. The next thing that we do is our 30-point inspection. This is a complete platform deep dive audit where we're helping our customers understand how they're using the platform and how can they optimize to get more value from it. And so this is something that we started doing last year. Our customers love this. It really helps them understand what's possible. And so I put this as a medium because an audit, to the extent that we do for this, actually does take quite a bit of time. It's thorough, it's well presented and put together. It's beautiful. It's a great asset for our team, for our customers. And so this is something that takes a little bit of time. Risk management. This is something that's going to come up, right? Maybe you have a customer who is just acquired. Maybe you have a customer who had an executive turnover. You've got a customer who's telling you that they've disbanded their entire post-sales team and now there's the renewal's at risk. There's a whole bunch of things that will come up causing risk in the partnership. And we all know that when risk enters into any relationship, we typically will invest more time to navigate it, right? Just because we want to get things back into a good place. So we might double down. So I put risk at a higher time intensity here. And risk, like I said, could be a multitude of things creating risk in the partnership. But once risk is introduced, my team is going to be spending a little bit more time on that, and I've got to account for it. Something else that we're focused on is relationship development. Right? This could be, in-person meetings with our customers. It could be, strategic executive calls. I know that I do a bunch of those as well to support our team. But really how your team is nurturing and developing those relationships. But it's not just that. It takes a long time to actually map out and do proper research to start to facilitate and understand what are the right relationships that they need to be focused on. So relationship development is something that our team is spending time on. We've got to account for it. Now, our team also manages the renewal process. So for us, renewal management, we think about maybe we're spending anywhere from 1 to 2 hours a week while they're in the renewal cycle, just to make sure they have everything they need. We're going through that process effectively. We use MEDPIC as our kind of commercial motion methodology. And this helps to make sure that we've got all of our ducks in a row to flawlessly execute against any of these things, whether it's growth, expansion, a renewal. And so our team is spending a bit of time just making sure that our customers have everything they need. Now, some renewals, as we all have experienced, go really quick, really fast. Customers super happy. Yes, please send over the doc, execute it, right? Maybe we spend 30 minutes in total. Then we have other renewals that is not the luxury, right? It might take a lot more time. And so renewal management could take a longer time investment. So again, we're just trying to figure out the averages here. And the last thing our team is spending on time on is success planning. This is where we're identifying goals with our customers. We're mapping towards those objectives. We're making sure that we're very clear on how they're defining success. So I've had to just go through and like I said, these are my things that I said, most of our customers are going to touch one of these, or actually all of these, right? There might be other things in addition to, but on average, they're going to do these things. I've got to figure out how much time each of these on average takes. Now I'm breaking this down, like I said, by week, because that's the math I'm using, and I'll show you momentarily. But this helped me understand time that we need to spend. So this is a very generic way of doing kind of like a top-down, bottoms-up analysis of like where we're spending our time to package back into that leverage ratio. So what I would say is go through and go do a similar exercise. Go figure out what are the things that in your customer lifecycle your team is going to need to spend time doing, and then calculate on average what the time investment is going to be. Because you'll quickly see that if you're expecting your team to spend, 10 hours per week on a customer, navigating them through the life cycle, they're not going to have a lot of bandwidth to support many customers. So it's a really great exercise. I would also encourage you, do not do this alone. If you are a leader, I will say you will make a lot of false assumptions on how long these things really take. I know, having worked with my team very closely, I have a good understanding of what the time investment takes for us to navigate some of these things. If I did it without their advisement, we'd probably get this real wrong, right? Because I would probably make the assumption that, oh, this takes 2 hours, that takes 4 minutes, and this takes, a day. Who knows, right? My team is there to tell me that, Kristi, actually, this is how long onboarding takes, and actually, this is how long it takes to manage our renewals. And like I said, you're coming up with averages. This is not a perfect science, but this will help you visualize the types of things you need your team to do in order for your customers to achieve their success, right? Again, it's all through the lens of your customer. Okay, so now you've gone through that. what I've tried to do is now take all of those things and map those back in to my life cycle to say, on average per week, right? This is average time per week per one customer. If I have a customer who's in our align stage, there's a lot of things that happen, but our align stage typically happens within 5 days, right? Because it's literally our handoff from sales to CS. It's our initial partnership kickoff with our customers. It's, you know, us having that knowledge transfer, right? So for us, the align stage, 1 week, but it's a lot of hours. So it's really condensed, high time commitment. Execute is all about our onboarding, right? And so on average, when I think about how much time my team is spending onboarding our customers when they're in that stage, probably about 2 hours per week. But again, that's happening in slightly longer than align. This is about a 6 to 8 week period of time. So 2 hours per week per customer, because think about it, we're probably doing hour-long sessions with them. And then there's follow-up. There's, you know, the prep before, the follow-up after, any action items that we have. So I buffer in basically an hour that my team will have to do in kind of administrative work to support that meeting in one given week. The next one is our realize, right? This is all about our recurring cadence, our customer adoption, and helping them see value. I'm putting an hour here because, again, not all of our customers are meeting with us weekly, right? Most of our customers are meeting with us every 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks, depending on how they like to partner with us. So if I average an hour a week, this is giving us time for check-ins, answering questions, right? So it allows me to kind of factor some of that in that says, no matter what, my customers are getting some time allocation every week, but we know that some customers are going to need a lot 1 week, some customers are going to need nothing from us 1 week. And so it's to balance it out. Again, it's all about averages. And the last one is how long our customers will take when they're in that advocacy stage, which again, I've given this an hour. This could be, you know, all depending on resources, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But if we're working with them through their renewal, or we're working with them on some cool advocacy initiatives, we're giving an hour there as well, a week, right? So again, if you think about this through a 52-week cycle on average, right? I average this out to say, roughly we're giving our customers an hour a week, right? That's what it's going to average out to, because like I said, align happens in a very short period of time. Execute slightly bigger, but still really small percentage of that 52-week period. And so again, if you look there, this is a year 1 example, right? Year 2 might actually be a little less. We'll talk about that. So this helps me understand, okay, on average, my customer needs 1 hour per week allocated in order for this to make sense. Oh man, sorry guys, this is where it's like not having a mouse is bumming me out. Okay, so here's where we have fun with math. Now I will tell you, my husband is the math person. I am not a math person, so that's why it looks very visual. But we're gonna break this down. Starting from the bottom, we're gonna build up. So on average, I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only non-math person here. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so starting with the bottom here, 40-hour work week. This is an average, right? I'm sure we can all raise our hands and say, hey, Kristi, I work 60 hours a week. Hopefully you guys are working 40 hours a week. I know that we all put in a little bit more, but we'll say average is 40 hours a week because we want to base this off of a normal, healthy work week. So 40 hours per week. On average, we know that the team's going to have things like internal meetings. Heck, they need to eat lunch, probably breakfast too. They need to stretch their legs. They need to feed their dogs, feed your babies, right? So you can't take 100% of that time. So what I'm saying is that 75% of that, and for each of you and your companies, it's going to be different. I'm saying for us, 75 feels like an appropriate amount of time to say 30 hours a week are allocated towards customer work. Now, don't misread this. This doesn't mean I'm spending 30 hours a week on calls with customers. This means I'm spending 30 hours a week doing customer work. This could be prepping decks. It could be doing industry research. This could be doing a whole bunch of stuff, but it's in support of your customer. It could be following up on a support ticket. It could be, following up on a services project. It could be reading a press release about them getting around to funding, right? So I'm suggesting here that 30 hours of their work week should be, because that's their job, right? As a CSP, right? A customer success professional working on your customers. I'm throwing it out there, 30 hours per week spent on their customers. So now if I know that 75% of the 40-hour week is 30 hours, and I have also determined that an average customer needs an allocation of 1 hour per week, I can then, now I'm in orange, right? So we're moving fast up this. I can then suggest that estimated 30 customers is what my team can handle, right? Because that's to say 1 hour per week per customer. Now, what I will say is that you're going to have a good portion of your customers who don't need that. And why? Remember that last slide I did call out and I said, remember, this is an example for year 1. I will tell you, year 2, year 3, beyond customers do not need the same level of commitment. Remember that align stage of that 3 to 4 hours, onboarding, not the same. They probably don't want to meet at that same aggressive cadence because they're very intimately familiar with the product. This could also be repeat customers. Think about it. How many buyers have gone to another company, brought your solution on board? For us, it happens all the time, that second order revenue. So they're already very familiar with the platform. They're not relying on us as much. So they determine how they want to work with us. But we will say that you're probably going to have a good portion of your customers who will have a reduced scope. So for the reduced scope, I'm averaging, again, this is all averages, that they're going to require half the time. So what does that say? Basically, on average, they're going to get a half hour per week instead of an hour, which means if half of my customer base only needs me for half the time, I'm going to increase that an additional 15 customers, because if my base was 30, half of that is 45. Half of that is 15, 30 plus 15. Again, I'm not great at math, 45. So this is how I was able to completely build into this. This is my number, right? This may not make sense for you. Your customers might need a lot more. You might have a white glove service where you have one customer to one CSM. That's going to look very different. Based off of the activities that I showed you and our life cycle, based off of a standard 40-hour work week, based off of my estimation that my team can commit 30 hours a week to customer work, we know what the average time each customer needs per week. I can come up with these numbers and build to saying that my team can comfortably, it's a stretch, right? 45 is probably, they're feeling definitely at their capacity. I'll be very honest with you, but that would be the max. So between 30 to 45 customers is where I feel like my team should land in order to feel like they can do the work that I need them to do, that they can do the work that their customers need them to do. And that's what's important, right? Figuring out the scope where you're not inundating your team, you're not crippling them, because they've got to do the work for the customers, right? Your customers have to get what they need. So this is how I've built into mine. It is a very easy way. Like I said, I don't do math, guys. You don't see an Excel spreadsheet here. There's no formulas. I don't have a pivot table. This is basic. This is like me saying, okay, if I think this and that, right, do some basic adding. So if I could do this, you can all do this. I am highly confident in all of you. So this is how I came up with our customer time management and how I built our first scope assessment of what this ratio should look like. Now we're going to unpack a couple of things because this is not it. So there's other data to consider. Now, the first one I've got here is your average ARR per customer. If your customers are spending $1,000 per year, right? That is a very, very low amount. You cannot financially, as a business, probably staff having a ton of CSMs to support that same leverage ratio, right? So how much your customers are spending are important, not because of the experience you're going to design for them, but to make sure that it financially makes sense for your company, right? So that is critical to understand. The next thing here is understanding cross-functional support. Do you have a team that manages onboarding? If so, you've got to eliminate that component from this experience. Do you have an account management team or sales that manages your renewal process? Take that out of the equation. Do you have a marketing team that works on all your advocacy initiatives? Take that out of the equation, right? All of a sudden you're freeing up more team because you've got all this cross-functional support, right? Do you have an awesome technical support team? So much so that your customers don't need to go to your CSMs. That is an ace in the hole. If you have a very weak support team, that could also be impacting this, right? Because your team is going to be inundated with support tickets or follow-up or things like that. So understanding where your strengths and weaknesses lie across your organization impact this number. Something else to consider is your average CSP's salary by segment, right? So this is important as you start to figure out financial viability. Like, does this make sense? Can I afford to staff this ratio based off of what my customers are spending? You can't look at any of these things in a silo. You've got to kind of use all these data points together to find out a formula that makes sense. And the last thing here is I included customer sentiment and feedback. And why did I include this? because your customers should be leaning in to tell you what feels right and what doesn't, right? If your customers are telling you every single day, I don't feel like I'm getting the support I need more training, I need to talk to somebody more often, this product is super complex, I need help, I need help, I need help. You've got to take that into consideration, because perhaps what you've designed today does not make sense, right? If you are hearing your customers tell you that they are not getting what they need from you, you've got to reassess. Now, it could be, hey, your product is just not intuitive enough, right? So it could be product you need to figure out, but whatever the case may be, you've got to take all these things into consideration. Now, I'll tell you, these are 4 points, right? There's probably a multitude of things that underneath all of these are other things that I'm not including here, but I've included these 4 because I think that these are critical in figuring out how to come up with a number that makes sense for your business. Now, I'm giving you a breakdown. This is a little, again, fun little equation that we're going to work with here. But you've got to figure out the average ARR per customer, right? To kind of figure this out, to determine the average ARR per customer per segment, and then multiply it by the number of customers, right? This will give you a big, hopefully it's a big number, to give you a big revenue number. Then you're going to look at your average CSP salary, right? And so this is going to help you figure out, okay, how much does a resource cost to manage this amount of revenue for our business? And then the last thing you're gonna have to figure out is like the economic viability, right? Does this make sense? Like, does this scope make sense, right? Does it make sense to staff for the leverage ratios that we've designed? Again, going back to the fact that if you are a PLG product where it is very inexpensive to start, right? Can you afford to have a very high paid senior customer success professional managing such a small number of customers? It might not make sense, right? And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sense. At the end of the day, we want to do what's good for our customers, but we can't ignore that we have to do what's right for the business as well. So again, giving you basic baby math examples here, because that's what I do. Let's assume that on average, your customers are spending with you $30,000 is ARR, right? So $30,000 a year, right? Let's say on average, right, we're going back to Gary, you stop that, I see your comments there. Let's say we go back to that number and we say 45 customers was the number that I came up with, right? I said, each of my CSMs, you can support 45 customers on average. These are not client success numbers, just so you know, these are made up numbers. But $30,000, multiply it times 45, and then you come up with 1,350,000, right? So this is what my CSM's book of business would look like, right? So this is that number. Now, I'm not getting into OT and all these things, guys. I told you, we're dealing with baby math here because that's all I can handle. So average CSP salary, we're going to say it's $100,000. So if I know that my resource cost me $100,000 and this is the number that they're carrying, right, that 1.3, they're within that 7 to 10% range, meaning that I'm spending 7 to 10% on their salary to carry that number. That makes sense, right? Like literally, as we think about that for the business. So you've got to, and listen, you should be working with your finance team on this. You should be not doing all this alone in a vacuum, but these are some things that you've got to consider. And so I'm introducing these formulas and these data points, not to tell you that this is what you're going to go do alone in your basement, not tell anybody. No, you're going to just start to bring these points to the surface as you're having conversations with your leadership team, your executives in your business, your finance team, as you figure out how you can really staff, hire, grow to support your customers the way they need to be supported. These are data points you're going to need to pay attention to. All right, now, I did want to just make sure that we're going back to segmentation because this is important. Now, what I've designed up front was to suggest that that life cycle was for the majority of those customers, right? To say, okay, great, that life cycle, these are all the things that I want them to do. Here's the time investment that we're willing to make to do those things. Now, again, if you've got customers that look and behave differently, maybe there are there's less time that we can invest, maybe because of their investment in us, you want to design an augmented engagement model. This doesn't mean, oh, because this customer is small, we're not going to do business reviews, we're not going to train them, we're not going to do onboarding, and you know what, we're going to automate the whole renewal process. That is not what I would recommend. What you have to do is design an augmented engagement model by thinking through ways that you can save time, right? Save time and reduce the manual overhead to do the same work. Now, the first thing I would say is go and revisit automation. Where can you automate some of your processes to save time for your team? This could also be in just general communication, right? And so how you go about doing that, whether it's in-app communication, email, automation things coming from your platforms that you're using, what can you automate? The next thing is thinking about scaled programs. I love this, right? What can you do with training enablement series like webinars? KGP, who's in the chat today, maybe some of you are chatting with her. She is a senior CSM on my team. She launched our masterclass webinar series, which is a bi-weekly webinar series, which helps to train and enable our customers, and all of our customers are welcome. And so we love that because it helps to make sure that we're creating a forum to educate our customers, where it doesn't need to be one individual CSM who's doing the same thing over and over. We've got KGP leading these, we record them, we make them available to all of our customers, right? So think about ways to do that at scale. Can you do pre-recorded onboarding videos? And so think about that as well, is like, how can you introduce ways to scale your efforts so that you don't have to invest the same level of manual overhead? How can you leverage marketing? Anybody who listens to me, I talk about this incessantly. I love customer marketing. Embrace marketing. If you have customer marketing, even better. But how can you have your marketing team help you with product adoption? How are they managing customer advocacy, right? Again, if we think about that life cycle, how can marketing lean in and take some of those things off your plate? And again, maybe it's not marketing, right? Maybe it could be cross-functional teams, other folks as well. So figuring out, I love marketing because we want our customers to be maximizing the value from the product. They can help me with that. They can help me with advocacy, which is also huge. That is our sales machine, right? You've got customer advocates out there in the wild screaming your praise. That is great. So marketing is really key for me. And the last one here is something as simple as like in-app guides. So these are only 4 examples. You could be doing a whole bunch of things. You could have a community program. You can be doing a ton. But I wanted to just introduce this to give you some ideas of ways that you can augment. You do not want to say that the customer lifecycle looks and feels different for every segment. That's not what you want to do. You have one lifecycle. You've said, in order for my customers to be successful, this is what we have to do. But what you are figuring out is like, okay, if we have to do this, but we've got to reduce the manual overhead, right? How do we think about the mechanism or the way that we approach doing these things? And that's what we want to introduce, right? Is that way of thinking is how can we do the same with less? All right, so you know me, I love to end with a do not do. It's like my top 5 don't do these things list. And so I'm going to give you my top 5 don't do these things, or do these things. Some of them are do, some of them are don't. All right, first thing, do not think about this as a one size fits all. Again, I gave you tons of examples here of why that doesn't work. All the different criteria that we introduced here, whether it's the spend, the investment, the industry, product complexity, all of those things play a role in how you think about this. Do not look at my numbers that I put on this screen today and think that you could take what I put together and use that as your own. You can use it as a guide, and the deck will be made available for you. But you really got to think about this through the lens of your customers, their life cycle, and how you're going to make them successful. The second thing, you've got to consider, so avoid this, not considering customer experience. You've got to make sure that you're thinking about the entire customer experience, that in its totality, right? Everything that's happening with your customers, because the CSMs are playing such a critical role in that if you're not, this could end up being more work for them. Right. So even how you think about voice of the customer and feedback loops and product experience and all of these things, they all come back to the CSM because they are that initial point of contact for the customer, right? They are not the sole relationship owner, but because they are so key to the partnership, the burden of having a poor experience falls on them. And again, if we're doing anything, and this is, again, think about support and all those other things I talked about, right? If you have poor support experience and don't have the right resources there, that all falls back on success. And so if you've designed ratios, not considering those, and then all of a sudden your experience falls apart, all that additional work falls on them and your ratios are broken. You want to make sure that you are considering the financial viability for the business. Just because you want to design an experience that says, I am going to spend hours and hours and hours a week with my customer because I love them so much and I want them to be successful, that doesn't always make sense. And don't forget about this, like, we are in business to make sense, right? Some sense, we want to make some pennies here. That means you have to figure out the economic scale, right? What can you do to make sure that your customers are getting what they need in a way that supports your business model, right? And you guys being profitable. Fourth one, you've got to make sure that you're optimizing for this to increase ratios. What I'm saying here is that just because I've said that 45 customers is my number today, I've got to keep figuring out a way to maybe get that to 50, right? I've got to figure out ways like, how can I decrease the manual work, right? And maybe it's not because I want to increase the number of accounts I want to give them, or maybe it is. It could be I want to design a better experience for our customers. And so if I can free up more time for my CSMs, they can do more for our team. Other organizations might say, well, listen, we've got to actually give our CSMs more accounts. So how can we optimize for that? So you've got to figuring out, how do you go through that whole journey? Think about the 4 elements that I just introduced there. Really optimize for that. Automate, scale, better product experience, easier UI, in-app guides, things like that. You just want to make sure that you're helping your customers however you can at scale. And the last one is revisiting this over time, right? That big thing you can do, a big mistake is not revisiting this. You have to make sure that you come back to it. Like every single process that we create, just because it works today doesn't mean it's going to work tomorrow, right? Doesn't mean it's going to work in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, a year, 3 years. The market changes, your product changes, your teams change. You have to make sure that you're coming back to these things periodically and making sure that they still work. And again, just like I said, when you're designing this, do not do it in a vacuum. Make sure that you're pulling in your CSMs, make sure that you're pulling in your cross-functional leadership team, make sure that you're working together to just say, hey, how can we make this better? How can we make it better for our customers? How can we make it better for our team? So please don't or do these things, depending on how I phrase them. Some of this was weird, but please make sure you're taking all this into consideration, because again, once you've designed these things, it's not over. So still a lot of work to do. That said, I know that I'm 1 minute over of where I typically like to stop. I like to stop with 10 minutes for Q&A, but we did get to the end of that presentation. And so I will welcome my buddy Dave back with me.
Great presentation as always. And great participation in the chat by everybody. I think we just have a few questions we'll touch on. And one is a question on the 7, back on the slide where it talked about the economic viability. You had 7 to 10%.
Yeah.
And somebody asked, how did you come up with that number? Was that just an example? Is that an industry standard?
All right, listen, I'm not putting out there industry standards. I'm putting out there what I have found has felt right when I think about how much my CSMs are being compensated and the book of business that they're supporting. So I have found that number made sense for me if I could fall within a 7 to 10%. Listen, some organizations, we're seeing it right now. There are some folks that are getting paid an exorbitant amount. All right, let's not ignore that, right? So everyone's going to look a little different. For me, it's to figure out, it's 7 to 10% of their total book, right? So their compensation being 7 to 10%. I see another question come up there. So that's just for me to say, like, great, if my CSMs get paid this, they should be carrying about this much revenue, which looks different than the arbitrary $2 million number.
Okay, great. Our friend Gary, who's been on fire in the chat, is very hi Gary, asks, should the experience level of the CSMs be taken into account here? So senior CSM versus a junior CSM, does that matter as you go through this process?
Absolutely, right? But I can't account for that. Like I said, I'm trying to balance this out. I don't want to get too detailed, but yes, I know that a senior CSM who's done this for the past 15 years is going to be able to move a little bit faster just because it's very intuitive to them. They don't need to leverage all of my playbooks. They kind of know what to do. They've been there, done that. Whereas a newer CSM is probably going to take a little bit more time to do some of these things. But this is where it's important to consider that how you're staffing also against your different segments. I probably wouldn't put somebody who's extremely a novice on my strategic accounts or my highest book of business that needs the most kind of guidance in that whiter glove service support model. So yes, take it into consideration. Be careful how much weight you're putting into it. Okay.
Last question. The industry continues to talk about $2 million book of business. CSMs is the average is a $2 million book of business. Is that legit or is that bogus?
Bogus. I don't know why. Like I don't know why this is still being said. Like, please, everybody. Like, it was my first slide. Move away from this whole concept of everyone should be supporting $2 million. It doesn't make sense, right? If your product, listen to this, guys. If your product is, I don't know, let's say you're spending, again, I don't want to do math on the fly, $500,000 a year on average for a contract, right? So you're gonna have you have 4 customers. Maybe that doesn't warrant if your product is I don't know. Like, if it depends on what your product is, right? How much Do you need to invest in a life cycle? You've got to take all these things into consideration. That just having an arbitrary number makes no sense to me. I walk through all the criteria you have to look at.
There you go. There you go. I agree. I think that was a number that was thrown out by Jason Lemkin back in the day.
I didn't want to throw anybody under the bus.
Yeah, no, I think at the time it was a good rule of thumb, but we've become so sophisticated, and I think it was one statement in one blog when we realized that there's so many factors that are really at play here. So great content as usual. We want to thank everybody who's joined us today. Remember, next week, same time, same place, we've got another great boot camp that Kristi will deliver. She'll be back with her in her normal background, normal background that's famous, and it should be another great content session. But also remember, tomorrow, Kristi and I are heading over to the studio next to do final prep for the CSM Summit tomorrow. So tell your teams, tell your friends, tell your colleagues, join us whenever you can throughout the day. It's running all day. So if you have meetings, jump on for a session, jump off, jump on for another one. We hope you can be there, but we're so grateful you'd take some time every week to be with us. We're grateful for this community. We're here to help. Thanks, Kristi, for the awesome content. Everybody, she puts so much time and effort and passion behind this, as you all know. We're grateful for all that you do.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I had so much fun, Dave. Thanks for hosting me again.
Yep, you bet. Have a great week, everybody. See you tomorrow, hopefully.
Bye, everyone. See you all.